Welcome to the Classifieds panel. We have an esteemed group here today of speakers from around the world. I think we have Germany, France, Switzerland, the Middle East, Asia, Australia, all represented. So thank you guys for taking the time. We appreciate it. It would be good if maybe you can each give a 30-second introduction on yourself and your background.
My name is Michael. I'm the CEO and founder of Propertyfinder Group. We're the leading real estate marketplace in the Middle East.
Is this working?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So my name's Seth Schelin. I'm Senior Vice President and Corp Dev at Scout Group in Munich. Been with the company for just over 2 years.
Hey, I'm Olivier Rihs, CEO of Scout24 in Switzerland.
I'm Gianpaolo Santorsola. Yeah. I'm Senior Vice President for Schibsted Classified Media, and I'm responsible for operations in Italy, Austria, Switzerland, Mexico, and Morocco.
I'm Simon. Okay, I'm Simon Baker. I'm the former CEO of the REA Group, former chairman of the iProperty Group, and a serial investor in way too many property portals.
And I'm Roland Tripard. I'm the CEO of SeLoger, and I've been running the business for the last 7 years.
Good. So we talk about these classifieds businesses, these real estate portals, as real estate classified businesses, which to me really emphasizes as their kind of primary function the ability to generate buyer leads for agents that can let them sell their property. And I think they do a great job of that. But if you think about the real estate agents' marketing budget, it's really two purposes. One, to attract the buyer leads, but also to build their brand and attract the seller leads and attract the seller mandates. And arguably that's a more important, a more valuable lead for the agent, particularly in supply-constrained markets. And I think, you know, if you look at it, it's also important because the offline spend today in this area that's in print, that's in billboards, that's in flyers, I think, at least in the mind of the agent, a lot of that is going to building their brand and attracting the seller and generating seller leads. And therefore, for the online guys, it'll be important for continued growth to tap into that budget. Be interested to hear from you guys if you think the online portals today are doing a good job of that seller lead generation function, and you know, what kind of products are you creating to fulfill that function for agents?
I'll take that one. I think we're really at the beginning of the monetization of the leads. I think the industry is just scratching the surface. There's a couple of players in more emerging markets where it's a little bit less steep and you can be more disruptive, like in China, where they're being really good at monetizing those leads. Actually, they're not monetizing the lead, they're actually taking a commission. This is what Patrick earlier talked about, what Catcher Group is trying to do. And I think this is the big next move for the property portals, is how they're going to move into that space. It's obviously going to be more of a challenge in mature markets than it is in emerging markets. But I think that there's a lot of disruptions to happen there.
I want to come back to the topic of sort of disintermediating the agents and trying to capture the leads for yourself. I think that's a separate topic, but in terms of actually trying to provide some of the leads for the agents. Seth?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's one of two major strategic areas for us at Immobilien Scouts. Apart from just the core listings business, we call that VIA, that's German, you know, Vermarktung, Image, Acquises, helping the agents market themselves and get new mandates. And just to put that in perspective, in Germany, there's about 800 million of agent marketing spend, which is something like 11 or 12% of their budget. And within that, a good third of it is not spent on classified advertising. It's spent on agent branding, effectively. And so we have a portfolio of products or services that the agents can use for that. And these are all geared around giving the agent prominence as well as the listing and getting them to pay a premium for that, giving them some tools to identify listings that maybe haven't sold by private individuals where they can go and pitch for the business, and giving them some CRM software that helps them to run the business and to manage the distribution of their listings and the distribution of prominence in those listings when they're on the site. Just 10 or 14 days ago, we bought the number one agent CRM platform in Germany, a company called FlowFact. That'll give us about 4,000 or 5,000 agents using, whose desktop environment is essentially the platform from which they manage the distribution and publication of all their listings and their brand with our new sort of prominence-based products.
I do think there's a challenge for property portals to do this properly. And the challenge is that on one hand, they're happy to take the advertising revenue to promote a property, and they're very good at doing that. They're very good at extracting additional value out of the customer from that. And on the other side, if you want to generate leads back to them around house sales, what you have to do for the consumer is to actually put in front of the consumer the best agent. But sometimes the best agent doesn't relate to your best advertiser. So you have a slight challenge in doing that. How do you promote the best agent, or do you actually promote the one who's going to pay you the most at the top? And what you're seeing now is it's actually a re-emergence, because there was about 7 or 8 years ago sites in the US like Home Thinking, etc., that were all around ranking of agents to provide, to allow you to make a choice around which agent's going to best service your needs. You're now seeing a re-emergence of that type model as the two operate in parallel rather than through the one vehicle. So I think you're probably going to see the agents splitting their spend on those two types of outcomes.
Can that work? I mean, as long as the consumer is ranking, the portal is not ranking. If the consumer is ranking, then you're creating a valuable resource for consumers and the ability to monetize seller leads.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, and having been involved in one of these businesses, is that the majority of the good comments that you get are from yourself as the agent, and the majority of the bad comments you get are from your competitors. And so you have to find a way to get through the noise. It's not like Tripadvisor where you can have a lot of independence around this. There is a lot of challenges around running these sort of models.
Well, I think there is also a question of maturity of the customers that you're talking about. And for example, if you compare real estate agents with developers, what we happen to see is like 70 to 75% of the real estate agents, they spend with us against brand advertising, emailing, sellers leads, whereas with developers, it's only 20, 25% of them. So it's just a question of time. So the revenue potential is pretty big. We got to improve the products on a regular basis, but it's very much also for these guys to change their habits, and definitely when they think about branding, they think about local presence and local visibility, and although it's not the efficient way to do it, they spontaneously keep spending more offline than online. But it's also just a question of migration that is happening now.
Right.
We are doing an effort actually to capture this kind of branding needs, local branding needs. So we've acquired recently Easy Ad, and we are deploying it's a kind of self-service tool for local advertisers, local real estates, and local car dealers to actually announce themselves and promote themselves through normal but easy to serve display campaigns on our websites. So this is one area where you can capture more value.
Okay. Michael, let's come back to this question that Patrick raised about getting closer to the transaction, and I guess in his case actually trying to transact properties and disintermediate the agents. It seems like you are seeing some of that at least in Asia. I know in China it's sort of emerging. And I think there you have primary focus markets with developers. The agents are actually a smallish 25% of their business, and so there's less risk to them in terms of alienating their customer base. Maybe from your perspective in the Middle East, is that a similar dynamic in the Middle East? And then we can hear from the Europeans if there's a way to get closer to the transaction without totally alienating your today's source of revenue.
So our largest part of the revenue comes from the real estate brokers at the moment. The developers is mainly on a branding perspective, so we're not too afraid to cannibalize our revenues from the developers. The first step would probably be by qualifying a lead rather than going a grab at the commission. I think that's probably a softer approach. Some people do it quite well as well in India, like PropTiger. Their model is purely qualifying a lead and bringing it to the developer. So they've got a massive sales team in-house that takes the lead, calls the person, find out what they want, what their need is, and then literally reference that project or that project, and then take a commission. So it's not yet the pure e-commerce transaction, but it's a step further. And I think that's the approach, the soft approach, in order to transition.
I think the challenge is the big data is meeting real estate, above all for let's say, new houses and new projects. And if we can catch up, let's say, those projects on the platform and bring really the best product and best tools for realtors and for new house buyers, I think we will grab a lot more, let's say, transaction and fees for the platform. And that's really, let's say, a big challenge. But I think if we manage really to have the right data to know about the region, about the people, about what they are looking for, and bring them to the industry, we have there a new big challenge, but very interesting challenge.
And if I can add on top, I think that the game in Europe, where the percentage of new development is much smaller, then the game is a bit different, it's a bit more delicate. You don't really want to compete with your customers. So you need to find a way to create win-win solutions with your agents. So that is a different game, in my opinion. And then one of the most obvious first things you could try is like mortgage brokerage collaboration or finance product comparison, offering all these kind of services, and then offer them also to your real estate customers for them to offer.
I think it has already started, at least on our market, with developers. And just like with many other topics, user should come first. So it depends on the user and it depends on the product. There are times when you don't want that interaction to be too intrusive, that you're happy to just send a lead and wait for someone to call you back or send an email back. In some cases, you're very happy with being in a position to directly get your appointment online, and in that case, you're getting much closer to the transaction. And then if what you are buying is a hotel room or a 5.6% yield on an apartment that you even don't want to visit, then you may end up being very happy to do the transaction online. Mm-hmm. So it's not only about cannibalizing or not cannibalizing the customers. I think it's at least as much in terms of what do the users eventually want and how can we better stick to that, because that's the key dynamic of the market.
Right. That's only going to occur if the portals are very good at understanding what the advertiser wants and getting their products around that. But the consumer, you have millions and millions of people visit the website every day, but how well do you know those consumers and what they need? And I think that's the next big leap, is analyzing and understanding, and one of the businesses as I invest in is just focused on the property investor segment, which is a large segment, got a lot of money to spend, and they are the prime target for the developers, right? The developers would love to sell part of their new developments to the property investor segment. And what this company is doing is going deep on understanding what each property investor wants, the size of their current portfolio, the amount they average spend, the yields they get, and their capacity to spend more. Now, if you're a portal, and imagine you knew that about 25% of your audience, how valuable is that to then sell to the developers? You probably can extract a greater yield out of them for advertising, which at the end of the day, whether you're taking the money as a percentage of the commission or a much higher advertising rate, you're still taking a percentage of money out of the developer's hands. It's just called another way. So I think that's where the world goes, is into a far deeper world of understanding data and what the consumer wants. But that requires a lot of analytics and a lot of time and a lot of effort to build that up.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
It's a very good point, and I think that this might be a slight advantage for generalists, because generalists collect information or will be able to collect information about buyers on other topics and other categories and other, you can extract information on life cycle stage, and you might know that if he's buying a baby trolley, they most probably look for a bigger house. All these kind of things are all data that a generalist can capture, then reuse to offer a better real estate service.
That's an interesting one, because I think that from a data standpoint, you're absolutely right. Now the thing is, it's not only about data, it's also about branding.
Yeah.
And when you're about to, let's imagine as an investor in such a product that you may book online, you're about to spend 200,000 euros on something. Would you do it with a brand that is as well selling used bicycle on a C2C basis? So I think that's precisely where the debate and the fight is interesting, is because you have like plus and minuses on both sides, as usual.
I agree. The challenge perception of the generalists, the brand perception of the generalists is a challenge for them. Yeah.
But a lot of money will be thrown at the problem because the size of the prize is so large. If we think about the advertising budgets, then you think about the commission streams. It's an order of magnitude bigger again. So people are going to have a crack at it. Absolutely.
That's why I think it's important to have both in the same company, to have a generalist and and vertical. So you can have the whole ecosystem of the users of, let's say, a region, and you can play with both of them. So,
right.
And then monetize from the vertical to the generalist and have the data. And
so let's talk about that. Let's talk about industry structure. And I've probably heard 4 times today the term winner-take-all markets in reference to classifieds. The fish market, the network effects, creates a natural monopoly. It seems like we're seeing more and more examples of actually either duopoly markets. You have 2 strong verticals in the UK. You have a strong vertical and a strong horizontal in France. In the auto markets, you have duopolies in the US and in Germany. What is in your mind, the natural end state for some of these markets, and are these really, truly winner-take-all markets?
well, I think in terms of revenues, it's still, let's say, right that you say the winner takes it all. But there's always, let's say, space for number 2. It's good for competition, and for example, in Switzerland with Immoscat, we were clear number 2 4 years ago, and we could, like we saw before in Italy, let's say step by step, come really on the same level of the number 1. So is it possible, above all, with the new mobile challenge 4 or 5 years ago, when we started with our mobile activities? And if you bring, let's say, the best user experience and the best products on the market, so you can be also as a number 2, let's say, win money. It's still possible.
Winner takes most.
It probably depends. It depends probably a lot on the size of the market and on the maturity of the market. Clearly, the days of winner takes all in France, they are gone. And when we were road showing 6 years ago, that was enough as a pitch, and it worked very well. I mean, today, as a shareholder of SeLoger, I'm very happy, and we've kept growing that business every year since, and well and profitably. But I would imagine, if I was a shareholder of Le Bon Coin, I would be happy as well, because I mean, there was room for growth of both models and both businesses, and I don't see a reason why in the next 3 to 5 years it wouldn't remain the same. So to us, the question is no longer, is it a winner takes all? This is over. The question could be, is there going to be eventually room for a third player?
Mm-hmm. So I have two main considerations and pretty aligned. So first of all, I think that winner takes it all is still valid, but it's not so valid as before. Like we have seen number 1 position disrupted very easily and faster. So yes, it's a sweet spot to be in, but you never win. So it's something you cannot relax on. Then regarding the final industry structure, like my answer comes more to the microeconomic decision-making of our customers. Our customers are sophisticated enough not to willing to put all their eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. They are pretty afraid of giving all the power to one of us. So I think that there will be, even at steady state, room for 2 players. Then if it's 2 verticals or 1 vertical and a generalist, it really depends on the relative strengths, the quality of the product, the composition of the customers and the user experience they want. So it's difficult to say how, but I think that long term there will be room for 2 money-making players.
Well, I don't think you have space for, you said before, Roland, for 3. I don't know. I'm sure 2 it's enough, and
Hello?
I think there's a debate to be had about whether you can make a number 3 work, right? But below that, number 4, it's the Jack Welch rule. If you're not 1, 2, or 3, you should get out of the market. But in a steady state, it's probably 60, 30, 10, or 65, 35 of the industry profits going to 1 and 2. Winner takes most, and number 3 struggling to break even.
And how do you differentiate yourself? I mean, it seems like in those markets, maybe you're not there. In the UK today, you probably have content parity between Rightmove and Zoopla in terms of listings. And I think over time, the markets will probably move towards a state where most people have most of the listings. So in that sort of a content parity world, how do you differentiate yourself to the consumer?
User experience.
In what way?
I mean, one thing Zoopla had that helped it to get to where it was the sort of the market valuation proposition, which for the user was interesting, differentiated.
I also think in the UK, you also had Rightmove sort of locked into this 70+ EBITDA margin, which means that you tend to get so focused on cost management, and I hear quite a fair bit about that, that you sometimes don't either see or believe the guy is coming up behind you until he's right here behind you, and then it's too late. I think the interesting question is the definition of market. I think as we've always thought about a market, and I'll use real estate because it's the thing I know best, is we tend to think about it as the real estate transaction, and these portals exist around rents, buying, maybe even they start to then break out. But I think as things evolve, the market fragments a bit. You can get luxury, you can get rentals operating separately, and therefore the concept of a market leader changes over time. You can think about, and that's why I'm working with this company around, one of the companies around the investor segment. Once again, it's segmenting the market differently. I think as the size of the industry grows, it's now globally a 50 billion plus market cap business industry, the opportunities increase dramatically. There's also more capital coming into the market to allow you to experiment with new things. So I think what you'll see is a fragmentation of the market, and you'll get different market leaders in different segments. The core segments of homes for sale will always be the big one that people go after and talk about. But when you look in portals, often they don't talk about the developer segment, or they definitely don't talk about the rental segment. They're sort of like the long-lost cousins. But there are people out there making good business. Rent.com in the US, right, just does rentals, and so on. So depending on how you define market, and then also geography changes as well over time. So these two things, I think, will help us redefine what market is, which means that the leaders will always get challenged, but maybe from places they don't ever expect.
And the challenge of the leaders is to sit there and watch these little niches and subsegments and make sure they don't accrete into bigger niches and bigger subsegments, and then suddenly you find you've got a competitor. And the real problem from a user point of view is if you go to a site and you're not seeing all of the content, you're not seeing 2-bedroom apartments in the cheap part of town.
Yep.
And you go somewhere else, that's gonna erode over time, and those little beachheads will become battlefronts.
Exactly, and I think it's a great opportunity for anyone out there who's an entrepreneur who wants to get into this. There are segments to go after, because all that's going to happen is if you get big enough and painful enough for the big guys, they're going to write you a check to take you out and add it in to what they've currently got, and they'll just plug and play to their current sites.
Can we talk a little bit about mobile? And I think for a lot of these sites, you're probably seeing 40, 50, maybe even 50+% of the traffic coming through mobile. That can create opportunities and challenges. I guess on the challenging side, the ability to continue to monetize display as the traffic shifts towards mobile. But I guess more broadly, how you think about the classifieds business and the product needs to change in that sort of mobile environment.
Smaller billboard prominence is even more important, right? So if you look at just the content as a basic commodity, and the prominence of that content is what someone's paying for. On a website, desktop website, you can see 10, 15, 20 leads. Prominence means one thing there. In a mobile app, it means something different. And if you can get the agents competing for visibility in that small format, and you can price it that way, you should be able to have variable pricing between a mobile app environment and a desktop. Because prominence means something.
I agree,
So-
but sorry, go.
A couple of things about mobile. I think for sure, if you're dependent on the advertising banner model, you need to quickly move away from that because obviously that's gonna die. The second thing that's interesting about mobile, it's if the consumer is important on the web, on the desktop, it's even more important, and it really decides what happens on the mobile. And it's really all about the user experience. And so I think one of the threats for the classified, for the traditional sites of classified is maybe the mobile apps coming, somebody entering the market to be mobile only, who only thinks mobile, who the whole company is just thinking mobile. They can be really disruptive in terms of the user experience, especially in emerging market where the majority of the search is done on mobile.
I think it can be, we all talk about user side, sure, agree. It can be just a great opportunity as well on the customer side, on the B2B side, just to illustrate that. For example, now we have the opportunity, and we've rolled that out recently, to, for a sales guy of a real estate agency, once the visit with the acquirer is done, to live on its mobile device to show to the seller some statistics about displays, about visits, about for what reason the price should be taken down. All that stuff that couldn't be done previously right after the visit, and as a consequence, that never got done, because then the guy was moving to the next visit and to the next thing. So it's a huge, it has a huge potential for innovative services, which takes us back to your first question, because then it's the opportunity to sell more services and to increase the prices.
I think mobile is, let's say, key for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because everything will happen, let's say, from a user perspective on mobile. So if you are looking at a house, you're working in a city, in a quarter, and you want to know about the house, who is the owner, how is looking for, and so on. So you have to provide those, let's say, those kind of services, and even more precisely with more data, with more, let's say, also experience from other customers, and that's why for us was in 2008 when we bought the company in Vietnam, and then said, okay, we had 1.8% of the traffic coming from mobile, and now we think we have over 50%. That's absolutely, let's say, was the key initiatives then, and we are really happy about that step. But it's not over. It's just the beginning, I think, of a next step for let's say, all the developments and all the let's say, the key initiatives and the perspective of monetization in the future.
Good. I think we're out of time. Thank you guys all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.